everyone, and welcome to BHD Studios. Today we will be talking about my pick for the best camera from Fujifilm from 2022. And I actually think that this camera here, you can obviously see what camera I picked, the XH2S. I would argue that even amongst all manufacturers that the XH2S is a stellar camera. I would put it maybe in the top 3 or 4, even against Canon, Nikon, Sony, Leica, Panasonic, all the other manufacturers, because of what Fujifilm was able to offer in this compact hybrid both stills and video centric camera. So let's go over the reasons why I think this is the best camera that Fujifilm launched in 2022, which was the 10-year anniversary of the Fujifilm X Mount, beginning way back in 2012 with the Fujifilm X Pro 1, and now it's kind of come to a camera that maybe we would have never imagined that Fujifilm would have come up with 10 years ago, which is sort of it looks like a very modern camera. There's still sort of an essence of the original X Mount, but this is a really different type of beast of a camera, but still an awesome piece of photographic gear which can also do awesome video. So let's start the video now. And before we go on about me saying this is the best camera, just because I'm saying this is the best camera from Fujifilm in 2022, it doesn't mean it's the right camera for you. So a little bit later in this video, I'm gonna tell you which camera I would actually buy from Fujifilm if I were to buy a brand new Fujifilm camera right now. So right now I'm shooting this on the X-T4, and you guys know I love the X Pro 3. I have it in Dura Black, and I have an XH1 as my backup. So those are my 3 X mount bodies that I use all the time for all my content creation, for my videos, for my stills, my product photography, my talking head video, X-T4 being my primary camera. And this camera for sure is the best, but it might not be the right one for you. But I would say, first of all, what makes this camera very significant is that this was the body that Fujifilm launched the 5th generation sensor and 5th generation processor in 2022 for the 10-year anniversary. And as cool as the sensor is, I really think that 5th generation processor, the X Processor 5, is a really big deal because Fujifilm is claiming 3 times more powerful than the previous X Processor 4, which is also a great processor. It really evolved from the XT3, and they were able to put it into the GFX 100 medium format. It can handle 100 megapixel images, and so that was a great processor. This one here is 3 times more powerful as well as more efficient. So it does more with less power, and so that is great. And what makes this S so unique versus the non-S version, so there is an XH2 and an XH2S. Biggest difference being that the XH2 has the 40 megapixel sensor. This only has 26. Now I say only because the previous generation also had 26 megapixels, but the key is that S for stacked or for speed on this sensor. It has high throughput. Now I have other videos that explains more in detail of what that stacked sensor really means, as well as articles that Fuji love, but basically it means that it can handle a lot of throughput. It can handle a lot of images or a lot of videos, and really the bottleneck would be somewhere else other than the sensor, because this sensor can do a lot. And so rolling shutter is improved. I think it was 1/180th of a second in video, 1/150th of a second in stills, but a lot of different brands have done tests on this and say that the rolling shutter is amazing. So that's great for video as well as for stills. And in terms of ergonomics as well, this can be sort of controversial. I have the original XH1, which I love. At first, I didn't know if I would love it, but I do, and as you can tell, I haven't sold it because I enjoy shooting with it. But you know, the biggest difference here, as you can see, is that the dials are different now. There's a PASM dial, and there's no longer an ISO dial, a drive dial, or an exposure compensation dial, or a shutter speed dial. Or the XH1 does have, as you can see, it's ISO at the top, and then you have the drive dial on the bottom, and then you have your shutter speed dial, and then you have your photometry dial on the bottom, and there is no exposure compensation dial. You gotta kind of press this button and spin. It's not that effective, but still, I like the dials on the XH1. But in terms of the ergonomic feel and grip on the XH2 and the XH2S, I love it. It's more forward-centric, as you can see like this, where the XT series and the X Pro series are all the shutter buttons here instead of over here. So you see how that changes the angle of your hand? So better for low shooting like this, right? But having that combination of that new processor and that new higher throughput sensor on here, 26 megapixels, and so what you're getting is much higher quality image for video. I know a lot of you guys aren't video centric, but being able to do open gate, which means the entire sensor is being used, so it's 2:3 aspect ratio. Great for anamorphic lenses, or if you want to be able to crop both vertically, horizontally. There's no 16:9 crop, right? The entire sensor is being used, and that is a 6.2K open gate versus the XH2 and the XT5 can do 6.2K, which is basically the horizontal resolution, but that is actually cropped down to 16:9, so it is not open gate. So 6.2K on the S and the XH2 and the XT5, they're different types of 6.2K, as well as mentioned, higher throughput on here, so you can do ProRes RAW external, you can do ProRes HQ 10-bit 422 internal. Again, like I said, I wouldn't get into too much details about video because I know a lot of you guys are not video centric, but because of that higher throughput sensor and processor, you do have the CF Express Type B card slot here, which can be controversial, but I actually would argue that if you need higher speed as well as larger memory cards, CF Express is the way to go. Now you can see here I have a per gear 1 terabyte card, and it worked flawless. I loaned it to Julian Falk, my videographer. When we went to New York, he used this card exclusively from Vancouver all the way to New York, and then all the way back, no problems, no crashes. I used it during my review back in May, as well as just recently, same thing, no crashes. And CF Express Type B cards go up to 4 terabytes right now, and obviously can get higher. I know there are some SD cards that go to 1 terabyte, but they are super slow. Like, I'm talking 200 megabits per second read-write speeds, where we're talking here, this card is 1600 megabits per second read and 1300 write. So that is a super fast card. And when you get to 512 and 1 terabyte card speeds, that's where you're really going to see the difference when you're using these CF Express cards. So even if you shoot stills and you are shooting both raw JPEG and you're doing continuous shooting, you want fast cards like this, and you're not going to get cards this fast with this type of spec with SD cards. So sure, if you're buying 64, 128, you look at the price of the CS Express and thinking they're too expensive, but when you get to the 512 and the 1 terabyte, and you take into considering the type of speed you're getting with these CF Express cards, actually these cards are cheap compared to the top end SD cards. Of course, you do have an SD card slot there as well. And so if you have the XH2 or the XH2S, I would recommend, if you can get one of these 512 or 1 terabyte cards, I think you basically need one card. And if you get the 4 terabyte, I don't even have a 4 terabyte external SSD. So you can pretty much leave that card in there and do all your projects on that one card, and then use the SD card slot as a backup and swap out the cards as you need. As well, another big feature on the XH2S is that 5.76 million dot EVF. Now, I've experienced this EVF. I think it's probably made by Sony on the Leica SL2, and just looking through the SL2, just really, it doesn't make the images better, but just the shooting experience with the EVF is that much better when you have a higher resolution EVF. And now Fujifilm has it on the XH2S as well as the XH2. Unfortunately, not on the XT5, and so you definitely can see the difference when you're looking through here. It has that kind of that glassy look, and especially when you're outdoors and there's enough light, it is just a beautiful EVF to be shooting through. And so having this 5th generation sensor, 5th generation processor, using this stack technology that if you look at Panasonic, you look at Sony, you look at Canon, and you see their cameras with stacked sensors, they're a lot more expensive than what Fujifilm is selling this for. And if you look at the overall specs of the XH2S, not just for video, but as well as for stills, this is a hard camera to beat, even across other manufacturers. And within Fujifilm's ecosystem, if I had to choose between the 26 megapixel stack sensor and the 40 megapixel, I think they're both kind of revolutionary and evolutionary sensors for the Fujifilm X series ecosystem. I would say, technologically speaking, having the stack sensor is actually probably the greater feat on the new X series. And so even though, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, even though this camera is not targeting me, and this is probably not going to be my personal pick, but definitely I would have to say from an objective standpoint, this is the best camera that Fujifilm came out with in 2022. Another thing, other than the PASM dial, instead of having proper dials for ISO and everything like that, is also this articulating screen. That's not something that I just want to be able to like flip it out. And so here I'll show you with the XH1 here. If you're shooting, there you go. There you are shooting down low like this. And if you're shooting vertical, you just move it like that. It's much quicker for stills photographers, right? And well, with the XH2S or even the XT4, you know, you can't just flip it out. First of all, if you have gloves on, this is almost impossible to open. And yes, places like Canada, we do need gloves when we shoot in the winter. This is almost impossible to whip out this way like this with gloves on. And then you have to stick it out like that. And now look how wide you are, right? Even if you shoot vertically, yes, you can go like this, but it's a little bit more awkward. So for me, I think for videographers, this angle, as I mentioned, this angle is great. So if you're shooting down low, this makes sense for videographers. But this is something that a lot of stills photographers just can't get used to, as well as the PASM interface. And so I think this is another gateway camera for Fujifilm. So congratulations, Fujifilm, for coming out with such an awesome camera for the X series, even though this camera is not for me. So even though I think this is the best camera that Fujifilm launched in 2022, and arguably even amongst all other manufacturers, what camera would I pick? Well, I'll show you. Just give me 1 second here. So this is a camera that I would pick. For me, if I was gonna buy a new camera from Fujifilm, yes, I would get the XT5. And so let's, I have a brand new XT5, new in the box. And so let's quickly do an unboxing here. So this has never been touched or opened. This came in a few days ago, but I did not open it because I wanted to open it with you all here. And so we have all this paperwork here. And as you can see here, I want a printed manual, guys. And so if Fujifilm offers a paid version of this, I actually would pay, you know, 20-30 bucks to get the printed copy. But alas, there's no printed manual. Very sad. And let's just see what you get in this box here. You get a high quality USB to USB-C cable here. You get the USB-C to 3.5 mil headphone jack. So you can plug this into the USB-C port and then you can actually monitor headphones. Unlike the XH2 and the XH2S that has a dedicated headphone jack, this one does not. So this is the workaround. You get a decent neck strap here, nice and padded down below, and I like the monochromatic. And you get the charger here that you plug the USB-C in, and then you get to pick which plug, whatever country you're from, and you get the new MPW 235 battery. And so another thing is no charger. Fujifilm, please give us a charger. And so here we go. These are all the main accessories. And so let's get into here. And look at this. And I'm happy that this is silver, because the pre-production unit was in black. And so here we go, the silver XT5. And this, I think this looks awesome here. So let's just move out of the way and we will bring back the XH2S. And so here we go. Take a look at these two cameras. I mean, this is a cool looking camera, but I mean, you know, this could have been designed by Panasonic or Sony or Canon, right? Actually, Canon cameras are kind of ugly. It could be like Panasonic or Sony. And here is the XT5, clearly Fujifilm DNA. And as I was talking about before, you know, for stills photographers, to be able to shoot down low like this immediately, and then when you go vertical, be able to shoot like this, I think this just makes way more sense for stills photographers. It keeps me tight. I love using neck straps, and so with this sticking out here, as I always talk about, this sticking out sideways here, and now I have my straps here. And also this uses a slotted lug instead of a eyelet lug, and so most of my hipster straps, I have to use the Peak Design anchors for this, and so I'm not a fan of this type of lug. But see how wide this camera goes? And if you're doing street photography or you're working in narrow spaces, you know, it's a matter of it almost, you know, it's 50% wider, right? So you're shooting this wide like this. And look at this. Look how much of a difference it makes when you're shooting. Look how much wider you are because you have to go sideways. And so for me, this is the preferred way to shoot. Obviously, there's advantages to this because, you know, I do shoot video with my X-T4, and having a selfie screen, being able to shoot and be able to monitor is great. But I don't vlog that much, and in my studio, I have a monitor. And so, and also being able to close this, and when you're storing it, or if you're primarily shooting with your EVF, it's nice to be able to protect the back. And so I'm gonna have to put a protector on the back here to make sure that nothing happens to the screen here. You know, in terms of build quality, you know, there's nothing wrong with the build quality of the XT5, but the XH2 and the XH2S definitely, everything feels a little tighter. The build quality feels a little bit nicer on the XH. It's hard to explain, but everything just feels a little bit nicer. But man alive, the XT5 looks much nicer. What do you guys think? Which one would you pick? And you know, and I've mentioned this before, if you notice the XH1, the XS10, the XH2S, and the XH2, those cameras only come in black, because I think if they made this top half silver, you would see the design weaknesses of this. It wasn't designed with aesthetics in mind. You know, these are pretty cameras, you know, it's like a Porsche, like a nice sports car. They're functional, but they're also beautiful, aesthetically well balanced, and everything just looks well designed. Not that this isn't well designed, I just don't think it would look as nice if it was silver. I think part of it is this top LCD screen here, and just the way that this kind of juts out. I don't think it would look that great if this was all silvered out. I think in terms of the grip, again, it's just a different way of holding, as I mentioned. Notice your hand is more angled this way, which makes it a little bit nicer to shoot down low, but again, this flips out sideways. Or this camera here, you know, it's not, you're not shooting like this, you're shooting like this, right? And so it's probably better for putting it up against your eye, but down low, it's not as functional here. And you know, in fact, if you're shooting down low like here, it's almost better to just use your thumb if you're starting and stopping video. And with this camera here, because of this angle here, these buttons are hard. These 3 custom buttons are hard to hit. And so it might almost be better to just use your thumbs to press these buttons. See that? So you're shooting this and then adjusting these 3 here, which are all customizable. No push-in button feature here. Notice that? No push-in. Or the XT5, that's the secondary FN button. This is a secondary FN button, and has all the dials that I love to use. There is an improvement in the doors here from the XT4. They're not the flippy floppy doors, but the XH2, as I mentioned, has a dedicated headphone jack as well as a microphone. And for the HDMI, it is actually a floppy door, but there's a full-size HDMI, which is great for someone like myself as a hybrid shooter, but as well, even if you shoot stills, you know, to be able to do HDMI out to a monitor and be able to do product photography, and you're not tethering to a computer, having a screen, a 7-inch or a 5-inch monitor to monitor what you're shooting, it's actually a good thing. And be able to have a full-size HDMI is something that is very useful. Here are the 2 cameras. Here is best camera for 2022 from Fujifilm, but this is the camera that I would actually pick. And in terms of lens of the year, now I thought about which is the best lens. I think it's not for me, but the XF150-600, it's a really good lens, great for sports and wildlife, and yeah, I would say that's probably the lens of the year. It kind of really fills out that end of super telephoto that Fujifilm can finally compete against the other manufacturers. But for me personally, I would say that the new 30mm f2.8, that's probably for me the best lens of the year, and I would buy that lens if I was looking for a 30mm lens. In terms of the best lens that I think would match either of these cameras is actually these Fujiluxes, or the f1.4 or faster lens. Here I have the 23mm f1.4, has the best sun stars out of all these lenses here, and here is the 3314, which I would probably say is the best seller. It's the cheapest of the Fujiluxes, the new ones, the RLMWRs. And here is the one that I really wanted to buy, the 18mm f1.4, but I still might get this lens. 18mm or the 28mm equivalent is my favorite focal length overall. Deserted Island, this is it here, but you know, my zoom lenses get this focal length around my 16-80, my 10-24, and so yeah, I don't know about this lens. And of course the 56mm f1.2. And this lens here is also a lens I probably wouldn't use very often. If I did portraits, headshots, that kind of stuff, medium telephoto, I would get this. I don't shoot medium telephoto. I don't shoot fine art. I don't shoot headshots very often. That's why I wouldn't get this lens. For me personally, it would be the 18mm f1.4. So 2022 was the 10-year anniversary of the Fujifilm X Mount, throwing in the XT5 just at the end of the year with the XF30 f2.8. Really finished up the year really nice for Fujifilm. I was actually really disappointed at the X Summit in September when they didn't announce the XT5. And I mean, I don't want to say I knew, but I'm like, they have to. They have to. They can't just come out with the XH2S and the XH2. That doesn't seem like a special year. So they came out with 3 kind of pro level bodies, and so I think beginning next year we're gonna see a prosumer level, maybe the XT40, that's my guess, and we'll see what sensor it gets. There might be a third sensor, who knows, but I can't see either of these sensors, the 40 megapixel or the 26 megapixel stacked, being in an XT40 in a prosumer body, but who knows what Fujifilm does. It was a great year for Fujifilm, and thank you so much Fujifilm Canada for sending me this gear to showcase to you guys. And maybe in my next video I'll talk about what lens I got to shoot on the XT5, right? So I'll save that for my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy shooting.